Welcome back. Allow me to now introduce our person of interest, Reenita Malhotra Hora. She is the author of the book titled Ace of Blades, the life story of the Blade King of India, a book that tells the story of her father, R.K. Malhotra. From Topaz in 1970s to Supermax over the years, the book traces how a homegrown razor brand became part of everyday Indian life. What makes it special is that it's written from a daughter's point of view, shaped by what she saw up close, the ambition, the risks and the sacrifices behind the father's empire. Let's hear from Reenita. Hi, good morning, Reenita. Thank you for joining us here on The Breakfast Club. It's taken a while for you to come out with this book, right? The thought began, I think, close to 2 decades ago or more, and you started working on it close to 4 or 5 years ago. So what is the story there, the long story that we're finally seeing in this book?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here. You're absolutely right. The seed of the idea sort of germinated a good 2 decades ago. And I would say that for the last decade of my father's life, I was really after him for this story, and hounding would be the only word. I was hounding him and he would say, I'm not ready. He had, at that point, sold out his business to private equity. There was a private equity injection of cash, which, he was very quickly ejected from the company. And he said, when I'm ready, then I'll let you know. That took forever, and I think it was the last few times that I actually saw him in person that I began to get signals from him that he was actually ready to talk. Come COVID, we all went into lockdown, the world shut down, nobody could travel. And my biggest fear was that I wouldn't see my parents again. So October 2020, towards the end of COVID, my brother orchestrated for them to fly to England, and I flew to England from California, where I lived. That's where I met my parents. That's where I began to really interview my father, because he started talking the very next day. And I ended up with something like 14 and a half hours of tape, which became exactly my source material. Little did I know then that would be the last time I would see him.
Right, you've written all your life, and being a journalist, you love doing the same. When did you decide that this should, or the next thing you write is going to be about your father? And I'm sure it comes with its own challenges, Reenita, isn't it? Really detaching from the person you possibly, one of the most loved persons of your life, and, thinking of it as something that's all about his life without the emotions.
Absolutely. Not an easy thing to do. Most of RK's work, his life work, came before the age of the internet. So forget about phones or social media, anything like that. Most of it came even before the internet. So if you had looked online, maybe even up to 3 weeks ago, you would have found nothing, literally nothing, except for perhaps records, from lawsuits in public domain. Now, I knew that, and I was determined that this was a very important piece of Indian history that needed to be documented. And like I mentioned, I got my source material the last time I saw him, but that wasn't enough, obviously. So right after that, I needed to go and interview whoever I could, and I did. So it was, whether it was members from the family, whoever wanted to talk, ex-colleagues, ex-staff, ex-workers, Brandy Gill, who ran Gillette India, his friends, whoever I could get to sort of vet, interview, and validate what he had said. And you're right, it was a difficult process because I had known this man all my life as his father. I had always behaved, towards him as his child. But I think it was in that year after he passed away that I was able to separate myself, to detach and to understand him as a character and as a human being that was not my father. A man who really struggled throughout his life to make his mark.
And internally, somewhere has your relationship with him changed and evolved ever since you got down to write this book, and ever since it's come out and possibly you've given it your first read?
Absolutely, because like I said, I understand him now as a human being, as a
Yeah.
flawed human being and as a brilliant human being, but not as my father. Many people will say, "What a great tribute to your dad." It wasn't meant to be a tribute. The fact that it is fantastic, but it's meant to document, as I said, a very important piece of Indian history.
How would you motivate our viewers this morning to really go for this book on the shelf? So tell us, what is it that they stand to gain the most when they go ahead and give Ace of Blades a read? Is it business ideas? Is it rising from business setbacks? Or is it really his personal business ethics that you've given the biggest priority?
You know, it's all three. I say that this is a coming of age story on three levels. Of course, it's a coming of age for the protagonist, R.K. Malhotra himself, because as you rightly say, he had to struggle. He developed a whole sense of personal business ethics and modus operandi that we could all learn from. But it's a coming of age story for India itself, for the FMCG sector, and specifically for the razor blade industry, because he really built this industry with his own two hands. And I use the word industry rather than his company or his brands or his blades, because it went far beyond that. It's also a coming of age story for every single Indian man who for 60 out of his 84, 85 years of RK's life shaved with his products, because after all, what do Indian men do when they come of age? They shave.
Yeah. And are there any business tips or things that young entrepreneurs or ones who are looking at starting off something new, they stand to gain here? Because if we talk chips, there's one brand that comes to your mind. Traditionally, if we talk washing powder, there's one brand that comes to your mind, at least for the Indian audience. And Topaz is no different when it comes to razor blades. So for anyone starting off or thinking of opening something new, getting into something new, is there more for them in the book?
There's a lot for them in the book. They will read through all of that as, you know, it's a good 400 pages. Towards the end of the book, however, I do put together a list of 30 odd life principles of RK, which he really strongly believed and lived by. And these are principles that he applied to his business, to his life, because the two of those were intricately connected. He couldn't distinguish one from the other. And to really command success in the market, in his life, for his brands, for his business, he firmly stuck to these principles. So, you know, starting out with things like when you go through life or business, you don't look in the rear view mirror because the traffic is ahead. These are simple metaphors that he lived by, that he taught us. And when I say us, it wasn't just his descendants, it was everybody who he worked with, and arguably they were more important even than his descendants. But it's these life principles which are also his business principles. That towards the end of the book, there are a good 30 of them, and I strongly suggest that every reader look at those, don't miss out.
Have early readers reacted in a way that surprised you? Because a lot of times when you're at it, when you're going through the entire writing process, and you're so closely linked to the thought, the idea, the feeling behind it, you do not pick on things that might stun people. So have people come with feedback or reaction that's left you a little bit surprised?
A lot of feedback, great feedback, and some of the feedback that has really left me surprised, yes, is coming from the daughters, coming from the females. Because there really is this reaction about how much they can learn from their fathers. As a female myself, I didn't really get to know my father until I was an adult, because as a very patriarchal person, he did not know what to do with little girls. They were the domain of the mother. And it wasn't until I sort of grew up, went to college, went abroad, that I began to connect with him as a person. And then, of course, there was a lot of conflict after that, because I disagreed with a lot of what he said. And he was a very feisty, independent person, very strong-viewed and insistent on his views. Fortunately, unfortunately, perhaps I took after him. So there was a lot of argument. So a lot of my books that I write, whether they are fiction or non-fiction, tend to be female driven, with very strong females. or on the flip side, very male dominant, this being one of them. And I did think about that. And, I didn't want to inject the female perspective just for the sake of it, because every book deserves its place, every story deserves its place. However, you do find a lot of strong female characters. His mother, his wife, they certainly feature very prominently in his story. But what I'm getting now, which I wasn't expecting and which has been surprising me, is that a lot of what you are reading are conversations and things that you can learn from a father to a daughter. And even if you have a difficult relationship perhaps with your father, or are estranged from him, or he doesn't know how to deal with you, like my father didn't know how to deal with me as a child, there's so much you can learn.
How lovely. So we'll wrap up this conversation on that very positive note. It's been lovely speaking with you this morning, Reenita. Thank you so much, and all the very best for Ace of Blades.
Thank you. Thank you so much.